The first setting we will be taking a look at is anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing helps the game look a lot better by smoothing out jagged edges inside the game to give you a more clear and crisp image to look at. Like always, I've tested this both in 4K, 1440p and 1080p because my recommendation can differentiate depending on the resolution you're playing in, because usually the higher the resolution, the less you actually need anti-aliasing because you have so many more pixels on the screen that are able to create a more crisp and clear looking image. If we firstly take a look at 4K, here you can see that we have a negligible difference in our performance. At max is around 3% between very low and all the way up to ultra. In terms of quality, I didn't see any quality difference after we hit medium. High and ultra doesn't seem to make that much of a difference, and low and very low seem to be more or less the same. Therefore, I would recommend medium for the best performance to quality balance. If we then take a look at 1440p, the story is actually the same. This setting doesn't seem to have that much of a difference on your performance, which is good. And again, I would recommend for you to use the medium option because low and very low looks very ugly and very jagged, and that can be very distracting while you're playing a competitive shooter like PUBG. And high and also doesn't really bring anything to the table, and it looks the same as medium, so you might as well use medium. Lastly, if we take a look at 1080p, here I would recommend for you to use the higher option. And the reason for that is that because we are in a lower resolution, we need some more anti-aliasing to make up for that and to still keep a clear and crisp image to look at while we're playing. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my video. Today we're taking a look at PUBG, where we will analyze all the different settings to see how they compare in terms of FPS and quality. And lastly, I'll show my own optimized settings that I recommend. If you have any suggestions for other games you would like for me to analyze, feel free to write them in the comments below. If you liked the video, please like and consider subscribing for future videos where we'll take a look at other games. The next setting we'll be taking a look at is post-processing. Post-processing controls the quality of different post-processing effects. So that can be something like guard rays coming from the sun inside games, HDR lighting, other kind of lighting inside the game, and ambient occlusion. In my example here, I have chosen to test ambient occlusion because that is usually the one that has the biggest impact on your performance. As you can see from my example, while standing inside this little warehouse, I lose up to 23% of my performance going from very low and all the way up to ultra. Another thing to note is that very low seems to more or less turn ambient occlusion off, and after we hit low, which seems more or less to turn it on, we don't see any noticeable difference going up to medium, high or ultra. Between very low and low, you can clearly see a difference in the boxes in front of me and also the railing up top, where both of these kinds of objects lose their extra shadows inside the small crevices. Therefore, I would highly recommend for you to use the low option, as this seems to be the best balance between quality and performance. The next setting we will take a look at is shadows. Shadows controls the quality of the different shadows inside the game. Inside PUBG, this does not seem to control the amount of shadows you'll be able to see or how far away you'll be able to see the shadows render in, but more so affect the actual shadows and the quality of those that are casted. Another thing to note is that it doesn't seem to affect your performance before you go up to either high or ultra, where you can lose up to 8% of your performance. In terms of quality, I didn't notice any noticeable difference between very low and all the way up to ultra. Therefore, since you don't lose any performance, I would highly recommend to go up to medium and use the medium option for shadows. Now let's take a look at textures. Textures controls the quality of the different textures inside the game. Therefore, this setting also has one of the biggest impact on the perceived quality of the game. As it is common with the textures option, also just generally in other games, this does not affect your performance that much. At most you're looking at around 4 to maybe 5% of performance loss between the lowest and the highest possible option. The biggest differences you're going to find in your RAM usage and your VRAM usage, because as you go higher in the quality of the textures you're using, they are also going to take up more space and therefore take up more space in your RAM and your VRAM. For my recommendation, I would recommend for you to at least use the medium option, as this does not seem to affect your RAM usage at all, and it only slightly affects your VRAM usage. Besides that, you should always select the highest possible option you can within the texture setting, as this will mostly just affect your VRAM and RAM usage, and as long as you have enough of both RAM and VRAM, you won't really feel the difference in the performance of the game. Next up, we got the effects setting. The effects setting will control the quality of the different post-processing effects inside the game. So in PUBG, this means that it mainly affects different kind of particles you have. So that can be particles coming from the muzzle flash of you shooting your gun, coming from the smoke, from different kinds of explosions, the rain, and so on. Therefore, I have also tested this setting in different scenarios to showcase the performance, loss, and the quality difference between the 5 different options we have. In my first example here, I wanted to see if it will make any noticeable difference to the quality of the muzzle flash, but also the quality of the explosions, like for example from a grenade. But as you can see in my example, there doesn't seem to be any noticeable quality difference between any of these 5 options, even though there is a clear and very big performance difference, especially when you go from high and up to ultra. If we then take a look at my second example, I wanted to see how this would affect the smoke in the game, because the smoke in the game is notorious for really hammering your FPS. And as you can see, or maybe can't see because there's a lot of smoke on the screen, it still has a very big performance difference, and you still can actually gain a lot of performance by having this on very low when you're running around in smoke or when you're using smoke just playing the game. Lastly, I also wanted to just test a random location in the game while it was raining, just standing there and see the performance difference. And the crazy part is that the performance difference is exactly the same, now almost down to the percentage difference as it was when I tested the muzzle flash. So this setting seems to have the more or less the same performance hit no matter where you are and what you're doing in the game. If you then combine that with the fact that I have not been able to find a single location where this makes any quality difference, I would highly recommend for you to use the very low option and save you a lot of performance. Now let's take a look at foliage. Foliage controls the view distance of the different trees inside the game. So as you can see, there's a clear difference, and as we move up in the options, we are able to further and further out see the different trees load in. My recommendation for this setting will depend a lot on the kind of player you are. So if you're a very competitive player, then I would highly recommend to set this to very low, as this will give you the most and the greatest visibility you can have. However, if you are a competitive player but who still wants the game to look nice, then I would highly recommend to use the medium option instead, as that is a very good middle ground between visibility but also quality of the game. Now let's take a look at view distance. View distance controls the distance in which certain objects in the game will load in. So for an example, this could be the different buildings inside the game. In my testing, I couldn't find this to make any noticeable difference while you're just on the ground, because at least on Erangel you simply can't see far enough for this to make any difference. However, like I said, this can also make a difference while you are in the plane, which is why I'm showcasing this in the video, because that's the only place where I could find a noticeable difference. And here it can be very nice to have it on the higher options, because you are able to spot the building, or you're able to render the building a lot faster. Since I couldn't find any noticeable performance difference from this, I would recommend to just leave this at ultra, especially if you are a newer player, where this will make it a lot easier for you when you're parachuting down. And lastly, let's take a look at DirectX version. DirectX version lets you choose between 3 different options of DirectX. So you have the DirectX 11, DirectX 11 Enhanced, and DirectX 12. And here it's important to mention that DirectX 11 is not a different kind of DirectX, but more so a DirectX 11 that the PUBG developers have made modifications to. DirectX is an API that is used for the game and your PC to communicate with one another. So basically, the better they are at communicating with one another, the more performance and the more stable of an experience you're going to have while playing the game. In my testing, I found that DirectX 11 is still the most stable and the best performing API, and therefore I would highly recommend to stick with that. Here are my own custom settings, which are based off the recommendations I have made throughout the video. Do keep in mind that you have to adapt anti-aliasing based on the resolution you're playing in, and you have to adapt textures based on the amount of VRAM you have available. But thank you all for watching. If you have made it this far and been able to use this video to get better FPS in PUBG, please like and subscribe for future videos where we'll take a look at other games. If you have any feedback on the videos or any other tips or tricks to get more FPS in PUBG, please share them in the comments below. If you're interested in these kinds of videos, maybe check out the video I made on Call of Duty Warzone. Have a nice day. Bye bye.